Well, I just thought we'd start with how we all got involved with the Cadets, where we came from. Everyone here has come from different environments, even different corps, I guess, at some point in time. So let's start there. Bob, you're up.
Well, I came in, my background was with the Crossmen. Was with the Crossmen in '79 with Thom when he was teaching, his first year teaching with Chris Thompson. And spent 4 years there. And when Thom was recruited to come to the Corps to teach percussion here with the Cadets, he called me up and asked if I would come with him to do cymbals. And that was really the start of it, because at the time we had the Corps had some other folks on staff doing keyboard percussion, and but he needed a cymbal guy, and I didn't have anything to do that summer. So on the promise of $500 and a place to stay, I came up.
Did you get the 500?
Of course not. Not yet.
I wasn't sure back then. That was a lot. So, Hannum?
Well, continuing the link to the Crossmen, I played there, of course, with Hop, and after the 1982 season, George had called and asked if I was interested in teaching at Garfield, and it was a difficult decision, oddly enough, because the loyalties in drum corps, particularly in those days, were very deep, and so it took me about 3 weeks to decide, but I finally came to my senses and realized that it was the next step that needed to be taken. So I was very, very lucky, obviously, because there's many great things already in place with the organization, and this was an opportunity for me to just learn. I mean, those days at the Corps were just the most learning that I've ever encountered in one place. So that's kind of really where I came from, and it was good because George and I had a chance really to sort of share the percussion responsibilities the first year, and
phased me out, I mean.
Phased him out as he went on to bigger and better things, but that's kind of where it started for me anyway.
That's well, we had a few phone calls. I mean, I kept waiting for you to call me back, and it went on forever. I was like, oh, he's never going to do this thing. So
it was a very hard decision because, you know, we had started the Crossmen as a corps, you know, so it was difficult to break away.
It wasn't hard for me to leave there. Robbie told me to get out.
Get out.
Yeah, I would have told me to get out too, so it wasn't tough. The thing is, when I was the director, or when I became director, Donnie Van Doren took me into a bar at the Fireman's Parade, which the Corps used to do then down the shore. Sat me down. He said, "You can do the drums." He goes, "You can be the director." He goes, "But if you try to do them both, we're all walking." and he had everybody standing there. And I'm like, okay. So, you know, luckily, you know, because I was petrified. I mean, I kind of been doing the drum thing for 3 or 4 years, not too well, but you could tell by how well they did when you first got here what the program I had in place was. But, you know, I still like doing it. It was like, you know, walking away from that was going to be tough too. So it was good you did it, because at least you like let me play and didn't totally destroy the charts the first year. Mm-hmm. You know, there's some remembrance of what I wrote.
Had that crazy quad setup, the backwards quad setup.
I think that was because the drums came that way. I didn't know you were supposed to turn them around. Wasn't too good. So, all right, Peggy.
Well, I came from the 27th Lancers. I had marched there, and then I taught them up until 1981. And then I think I became part of the package deal. George Zingali, I guess, had spoken to you, George, and decided that he was going to come over to Cadets. And I think Marc and I just came as part of the package deal. I mean, we had a good gig going with the Lancers, but I think it was time to move on, and we were ready for the challenge. And so...
I don't even think I talked to either of you ever.
I don't remember. I think you screwed up my flight. I was to get there. I never got there, and I was like, "Who's this guy?"
I don't think it. I don't think it was just George just said these people were coming. I was like, all right. I didn't know anything.
It was a great move.
What year was that?
Sorry.
That was the winter of 1981
Hmm.
into the 82.
Yeah, it was definitely not. I mean, basically, you know, with the Lancers were similar to this, to you guys with the Crossmen. We'd all marched together, grew up together. So, you know, when you went to teach, anywhere you went to teach, if you went to another drum corps on the side, we all taught drum corps and bands and winter color guards on the side, was always with, you took people with you. You always traveled, you know, in groups. It was because it wasn't a job, it was your gang, it was the people you hung out with. So, you know, for George to say, I'm going to go somewhere and teach men, he was going to live there. That was going to be his life. So really, you know, he just wanted to make sure he had people around him that he felt comfortable with. And, you know, we were both, like I said, the Lancers were a long, big visual staff. They've been around for years, very well known. So we were kind of, me more than Peggy. Peggy was pretty much already the big name with the color guard and all that, her and Denise. And I was just kind of one of a bunch of marching techs. So I was just ready to get away because, like all of us, you know, in a group you say, geez, this would be cool to try this idea or try to march like this. You know, with the Lancers it was, this is how you march, that's it. And there was no experimentation. So, you know, coming with the Cadets was, for me, that chance to you know, try things out that I'd always thought would be cool, because when I marched, I didn't like doing it. I didn't like to march. I didn't like a high march time. I didn't like to prance and play. I didn't like all that stuff. So I was out looking for ways to get rid of the things that I didn't like, which you couldn't do with Lancers. That was because it was such a traditional drum corps.
I think that was the great part about coming to the Cadets, was that the fact we were a very young staff and we really got to try out things, as Marc said, that we always wanted to try out.
Yeah, there was the Crossman way of doing things that, you know, great, that's the way you do it. And it's not a good or bad, it's just the way it is.
Right.
And that's what was great here was, I mean, the desire of, it was really everyone involved. It wasn't just, I mean, there was a great, obviously, Jim Prime and Michael Cesario and George Zingali and all the creative people, but really it was the technical staff who had free range to experiment with how you could do something. That allowed those guys to just take their risks.
And I think that was the magic when the pieces came together. You know, kind of the lineage back to the Lancers. Because I remember watching 27th when I marched in the Crossmen, and particularly some of the crazy drills that started to come out of there, particularly like in '79. You know, when the 27th, the drill early season was horrendous, but by the end of the season was one of the most phenomenal, you know, core performances of the year. Watching kind of the drill design then move over to Cadets, the work that we did in Crossman on the percussion side, you know, the lines could play, and they were really good lines, particularly in '81 and '82, but the pieces really didn't come together until we got here, where all the rules and all the barriers got taken away, because we were given the freedom to experiment and to do things that, you know, there were no rules, because we didn't know that there were rules, that we were young enough that we didn't have these things hammered into us. And I think that's what was really magical, at least at the start, and then the pieces just kind of exploded from there.
Plus, I think there was, I mean, right from the beginning, was always that, the talk always got around to, one way or another, we're trying not to be like anyone else. There was purpose. It wasn't just this group of people got together and went, oh, cool, and come up with stuff that maybe was different than other people. It was, the topic of discussion was always about how to look and sound and be different. And really, you know, right from '82 through the first, you know, through '85, it was really the percussion section allowing George to not write traditional percussion that allowed drill to evolve. Because the drum line could back up or come forward, and that was it. And if you went to the side, you stepped and put your foot together. There was no crabbing yet. There was no funk. There was no way to make a drum line move across the field.
Unless they weren't playing.
Unless they weren't playing, then you turned and faced and followed the leader. There were only a couple ways you could move, and so, you know, in order for George to evolve, you know, come up with the style of drill he did, it was really based off of the freedom of not having to have the percussion line up and down the 50, which you couldn't have done anyway. Charlie Poole would not have allowed it. Float would not, and rightfully so. That these major percussion ensembles, this is how you play perfect, and you got to stage it like this, and it's got to be like this. Anything else, and you know, no one would probably go through the sacrifice of the 3 or 4 years it took the cadets to figure out how to make a percussion line be able to play in this way. But it was really the freedom that, you know, the percussion people gave to the visual, to just do whatever you want and we'll figure it out later. And
Did we give that to them, or did they take it?
I thought that was my contribution because they were so bad. He's like, go ahead, move them. You know? Maybe the judge won't be able to keep up or something. You know, it's like I remember sitting there. He's like, well, they don't play any worse than we're standing still, so why not? You know, it was like. I still remember we were standing in that lot, that Ford plant, where we used to
up
write,
in Mawa.
you know, it used to look like a paint thing by the time it was done. But the first time it rained, it was that first year, it poured rain, and he runs for the car, and everybody else just keeps standing there. We're not even moving. The kids aren't moving, and he turns back. I'm like, he comes back, and he goes, and he's sitting there watching for a minute. He goes, it's not only like they're staying in the rain. He goes, they're actually trying to play. You know, like kids are like trying to throw down and everything. It's you can't even hear it's raining so hard. The kids nobody's even thinking about moving. You guys are up on the little truck yelling and screaming, guards out there, and he's hiding in the car looking out the window. You know, it's like this is not the same place we all came from. You know, so that was. Yeah, but I think it was. Guys really did, because they were so rough. I mean, the first year we came, I was just looking at recaps today with Unks. They're like 9th, barely hanging on in drums there, man.
Oh, I'm well aware of it.
Got good ensemble numbers.
We did.
Not much on the field.
No, we had great. The general effect and the ensemble were as good as anything, and better than most. And that's where we cut our teeth, I think.
But I think that, you know, with that, especially back then, that's, you know, experimenting. We experimented with everything you could think of. Philosophy was as big as experiment as anything. I mean, we actually honestly taught and talked about and tried to take on the concept of, you know, being non-competitive, like not getting up in the morning and do the job to beat another team, but just to figure out what we were trying to do. I mean, actually, because we were experimenting so much, it was more about, if we could figure this out, that's well worth the effort. Who cares if it beats anyone? And I remember, you know, back then, you know, definitely the percussion line wasn't technically up to the level of the rest of the corps, but it was never talked about. It wasn't like there was anything between. The kids never reacted to each other differently, like the drums were less. We certainly, as a staff, it never came up. It wasn't about.
I think I remember some yelling from the. I think I remember some yelling from the back of the bus a couple nights.
Back of the bus doesn't count.
That was you guys back there on the staff bus.
It was all directed at you.
I remember years later, though, competing with the drum line, because all of a sudden you guys were moving so much. It was like, hey, what's the color guy gonna do? You were kind of taking over our spots, and we had to find other ways to get our effects, and that was which was so wonderful, though, because it really was the total package. And what you were saying about trying not to compete, but. And it was never about numbers, obviously, and it still isn't, and that's, I think, a great part of what we did. But I still think we sort of knew that it was different, and I think that was good enough for us. At the end of the day, it was like, you know, we're doing something different, and that's all that mattered.
Certainly, I mean, by 85, we expected to win. It wasn't, when I didn't think we couldn't win.
Well, you could see it even if, I mean,
you know, I just felt that it wasn't like, you didn't say it to people. You certainly didn't say it to the kid. It wasn't like you taught competition, or you know. I mean, obviously everyone wants to win. It wasn't. You know, I'm not saying it wasn't that, but you know, I've been around. I've taught a million places before and after, and you know, the motivation to get a kid to perform the show. In quite a few places I've been is around, you know, getting that extra talent. We can beat Santa Clara tonight if you just, you know. It's not that we didn't think it, but you didn't say it. You didn't talk about it. You talked about, you know, the achievement of the thing itself as being the success.
The other
Kids
thing.
bought into it.
They did.
I mean, back then, they knew no recaps. They didn't know the scores. They had never heard the tapes. They didn't know who won horns that night or who won lights. They never asked the question. It was never posted.
Really, we didn't have to worry about the drum line.
Well, and maybe some of it was trying not to have them feel bad by saying the horn they won horns again, and drums came in 9th again.
Right.
maybe that was some of it.
The
Just
thing
trying
that
to.
I remember too is it was such a trust. I think the kids trusted us, and I think we trusted them to do what we wanted them to do. And I never felt anything like that before. Not
Right.
not as such a total package.
Plus, I think people talk about how all of a sudden there was Jim and Donnie, and then the three of us came along, and then you guys came, and it was like the ability to assemble these very talented people. But really, I remember as early as '81 when we first started doing winter, we had an amazing group of kids. The kids, it was a group of people who'd been marching 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, who were incredibly talented, as good as any drum corps, and they knew how good they were, and they just had never been given a vehicle. So really, they were hungry to prove themselves. So that once they knew they had a couple shows that could put them in the spotlight with the big teams, they took that on in a big way. And it wasn't, we taught them technical, we gave them technical training, but you don't teach people that desire. That's what they had. That was a major part of that, walking into that kind of experience. They've been, as experienced as any Lancer Corps I taught.
Maybe Michael can speak to that, you're the only one amongst us that was
being taught by you
That's
guys.
right.
Yeah, I came here in '82. It was my first drum corps, the Garfield Cadets. I had not marched in a drum corps beforehand, but I was going to school for music, and I wanted to be a band director, and I had seen drum corps before that. I think my first show was seeing the '76 Blue Devils, and I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. So now I'm going to school for music, and I thought if I want to learn how to do this as well as anybody, I should go to one of these groups. And a lot of the guys I were going to school with at the time were either in Garfield already or were going to Garfield that year. And I played bass drum.
What was your instrument?
I played bass drum under George Hopkins' fine tutelage.
What were you? Were a sax player or?
No, I played piano and a little bit of trombone.
I knew you were. You didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, we came
bass
up
drum or
pretty
nothing,
late.
so.
Yeah, I came up pretty late, and there was nothing in the horn line. And these guys I went to school with were all drummers. They're like, "Come play bass."
You were
drum. I'm in.
you're like the father to all those.
I was the only one
young
who could read
lunatics.
music. I was the only one who could read music.
Yeah.
But it was funny because as you guys sit around here and talk about the, you're being able to do these new things for, try new things, develop new things, be creative. It was very simple for me. It was, you were there because you liked marching and playing. You liked drumming, you liked playing your horn, you liked drum corps, and the premise was simple. You stood in front of us and taught us that it's about getting up every day and working as hard as you can.
Do the best you can.
That was it. It was very simple. So we weren't sitting around talking about winning drums and winning brass and because none of us had ever done that. That was like uncharted territory. But to do something that was crazy with these guys and new and get up and just bust yourself every day to work, that was the cool part of it. And it led to a lot of good things. I think it's kind of like Peggy said, you do that and then the smoke clears and you're like, wow, we're in third place. How'd that happen? You didn't know that. You just knew that you worked hard every day, and it paid off for some way.
George, how did you come to this corps? I guess it all goes back to that decision.
I started marching in '68, the Hornets, and ended up in the Crossmen. It was a merger. I kind of knew Thom a little bit. It was competitors, and then I think the kids just forced the corps together more than anything. We were just like, enough of this.
That's right, the 507 Hornets.
That's right.
Yeah. We even had a rehearsal before the end of the year. They put the two corps together, dumb move. So all of a sudden you have like 60 horns and a bunch of drummers. Then we had to go back to our old corps. That didn't go very well. Actually, the Hornets just said, forget it. We just shut it down. We didn't even finish. But when I went to the Crossmen, I was there from the beginning and to the end. But I was one of those kids. I went to people's doors and punched them if they didn't come to rehearsal and stuff like that. I was the enforcer in the drum line. Thom would teach them and I'd get out and punch them, to make them play better.
Made sure everybody was there.
So I had a lot to say. I was over Robbie's house every day, but I always say if I was in my corps now, I would throw me out because I had something to say about everything. I had the answers, and so it's probably inevitable that as soon as we were done, I was out of there. And so even Eric and Billy Kaufman, who came up to the Cadets, after that year, they didn't even want me to come. They're like, so they sat me down and said, you can come and teach the snares, but you can't say a word. I'm like, All right. So that's how I started. So the corps was so bad, but after about a month, I was the assistant director because nobody else would do anything. Started recruiting, and we got through that year. It came in 16th, 79, and then in 80 we had 12 horns. It was like April. I went to Doc Santo and said, let's shut it down. I mean, let's, come on. We had a couple drummers, but that was it. And he said, we can do that. You're the assistant director, you're in charge of personnel, and the corps didn't make 50 years, and it'll be your fault, and we'll let everybody know that. And I'm like, I still remember going home that night, sitting on a couch going, I can't say what I said, but so I called a couple people, went with a guy named Jimmy Paradise, who was with you guys at 27th. He was teaching the guard here. We got in a car and we drove to Mississippi every week for 10 weeks. Go down there, teach, come back, do clinics, workshops, recruit kids. So on June 1st, 2 busload of kids came in 1980. So we had 80 kids started with the corps on June 1st. And I think there was actually a show in Bayonne that night. It was at the kickoff, and that was our first rehearsal, really, with the show. And I don't know how we did it. Somehow we got into finals. The kids were, these kids were, the first night I had 80 kids sleeping in my house. The housing didn't work out. There were 30 kids locked inside a room at City Hall. It turned out Doc Santo calls me and goes, the city called. They said you have kids locked up inside a room. That's not true, right? I'm like, well, yeah. So I had to go over and open the door and let them out, There's all these drummers. I didn't even know who I put in there, but I couldn't keep the door open because I figured they'd be running around City Hall, so I locked them in. Probably not a good thing. And we made it through the year and came in 10th. Miracles. So that was 80. Came in 10th, and then 81 started off. We had Dave Bandy. I had a couple of new guys. Jim and Donnie, I have to say, I can't take credit for that. They were 2 guys who were teaching the Crossmen. They were recommended. They were under Larry Kirchner. They didn't really want to. They want to do their own gig. I had no idea Jimmer could write. He started writing because some other guys we had hired weren't coming through. We did the old route of getting, the best guys in the activity to be our second corps, if you will, and they were doing arrangements. But we didn't have whoever the last piece was, some ballad. So Jimmer did it. And that's how we got started with him. It wasn't on purpose. And Donnie was just local. It's all we could afford. They were willing to do it, and who knew? I really didn't know. At least with most of you guys, I kind of knew something. But to those guys, we were just looking for anybody that was willing to teach, after the mess that we were. So, and then Michael got Angelica, who I was going to say something about before. I think the reason we were allowed to do this was because of Don. If he had not left the doors open for people to do crazy stuff, I don't know. Like, I wonder, it's probably a good question. Could somebody like us come along today and try to do that stuff, or whatever that variation is, or would that even be allowed, or would you get chopped down? Because he definitely changed the game sometimes to let us, do stuff. But anyway, so that's how I started, and then I guess I was pretty. When I was hiring people in '82, I wasn't even the director yet. Doc Santo was, and then in September of '82, I went for my annual breakfast with him, and he turned over the keys and gave me the checkbook and said, "That's it." And I never talked to him again. That was it.
Wow.
And I knew now, but he wouldn't let me. His wife was like divorce or the corps. It was one of those with his wife. So he had to pump a lot of money into the corps because I knew these kids basically marched for free, a lot of them. Okay. So I'm thinking he pumped a lot of money in, and his wife said, "That's it." So I was a teacher. I had the checkbook. I had the keys. Came home to that T-neck house and sat on the floor and went, "Let's go." So, I had Billy Kaufman there and Greg Pitch and a couple guys, and we'd go like, "Okay, how much do you think it costs to feed them?" 10,000. 10,000, 12,000, 12,000. All right, and that's how we started. So it was not good, which is why at the end of those 3 years, we almost went bankrupt. I had no idea what I was doing, and we were just spending money like crazy. So it's a miracle we really got out the other side of that. So, but that's where it came. So I think this is 27 years.
Wow.
It's still here. So everybody's like, "Was this your plan?" I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." It's like, let's do this for a year or two. It'd be cool, and have a good time, and so no, it's great. A miracle. It really was, and it's great to be able to sit around and talk about it, because I haven't even thought about any of this stuff for a long time. But you know, even having to think about all the little stories, some of which you can't say, but you know, it was a lot of fun. Probably because in my mind, we were so young. I mean, I don't think I was leading anyone. It was like herding cats. You know, I mean, I had Zingali, you know, Van Doren. You know, there's nobody telling anybody what to do. You're just trying to keep everybody on the bus going the same direction. So, that's probably another story, is our buses back then. But so
We had buses, didn't we?
So
Mike has a good story about buses.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I have no memory of buses.
so,
But you know, in '83 was really interesting on a number of fronts because of the success of the Corps the year prior. Rocky Point was such a great number, and now such a legendary piece, and then taking that and then adding on to it the mass and the musical challenges that presented just as a piece of work, then layered on with the visual challenges that came with it, and then having all these great creative people kind of converging, you know, at that year was really amazing. It was, for me, a really that year was a life-changing experience for me. I mean, my time with the Corps was life-changing, but just the fact that I came to the Corps to do cymbals. I mean, that's what Hannum brought me here to do. But
wound up doing the pit.
and I, you know, not only did cymbals end up winding the.
Chicky, was he still here?
No, well,
Joey, I think, was
Oh,
more.
yeah, yeah. Joey Gaudet was actually arranging that year, and Chicky, Bob Gross, who actually set the stage in '82 for what we ended up doing in '83 and then beyond, when he took the instruments off the kids and put them on horn cases. You know, he took the carriers off, sat them on the cases, and that was really the first time that anyone had quote unquote grounded the keyboard instruments. And in '83, we got a little cleverer with it, where we actually had real instruments as opposed to marching instruments on cases. But Joey was writing and did the arrangements for most of the mass. And Joey came from Santa Clara and studied with, you know, was under Ralph Hardiman and had played some great shows there. And very creative, very well-schooled musician. But Joey also was going in to be a policeman. And he had, you know, took the test to be a Bridgeport policeman. And right before the Corps moved in May of '83, he got in. He got accepted. It's just like, well, I can't do this anymore. See ya. And the show was mostly written by that point, and Thom came to me, and Jimmer's like, well, we still have, you know, some music that needs to be written. And I'd never written anything in my life. And I'd taught kids percussion, but I'd never taught an ensemble like that. And so Hannum looks at me, goes, you want to take a crack at it? So the first piece of music that I ever arranged was Simple Song.
Oh.
With you know, having Jim Prime was, the great thing about Jimmer was he was very encouraging and showed a lot of confidence where none was really deserved. and that was, you know, that for me, that was really the beginning, because then, you know, someone took a chance on me to do something, and to have the opportunity to write to such a beautiful piece of music was an exceptional experience. But then to build on that and have some phenomenal kids. I mean, you talk about the kids that we had. We had great kids. We had some of the best players in the pit. Kids that were going to Juilliard and Eastman or in the Eastman Youth School. It really was an extraordinary time, because I remember at the end of the season, Joey came back, and he came to Miami for finals, and we were all together when they announced the score, and we were jumping up and down and hugging each other when the Corps had won, and deservedly so. But I remember turning to Joey and saying, just think what'll happen when we really know what we're doing. because at that point in time we were just beginning to figure it out. And I think Thom was the same way with Thom, because Thom was great with the percussion, but we were just figuring out how to deal with percussion on the move, the challenges of time and space, you know, how sound moves in space, what happens when the drum line's over in the back trying to line up with the guys that are over on the 25.
You don't play.
Say we still don't have that down now, so what are you talking?
And that was what was interesting, because 83 was really showed the promise, you know, the potential that we were on to something, and that set the stage for then what happened in 84 and 85, which were some really magnificent years.
So Jimmer taught me how to, well, you taught me how to write first. I learned by rote my whole life. When I was with Westchester, I did Russian Christmas music, and I'd sit there and drum it, and he'd show me how I looked at notes. Then I came up here, and I had to do it for real. And we did that Kenton tune, like, it was in 9 and 6 and 7. I'm like, what's all this stuff? You know, it's like, how come it doesn't have a 4 in front of it? I had no idea, you know, and he would sit there with me and show me, and I'd write it out, and he'd rewrite it for me. I mean, he sat there all night writing that chart. I mean, that was as much his. So he did, you know, I don't even know how he got us all through all that. So, and then still write his own charts, you know, magnificently.
Well, and the color guard, and just some of the ways that we would approach things in 83 that I thought were interesting, and at the time it didn't seem unusual to me. It just seemed like the logical thing to do, where we were up in Mahwah at the Ford plant rehearsing outside before we went out on tour, and it was either Peggy or George Zengali came up and said, let's do a rehearsal with just the pit and the color guard. And so we took the pit and the color guard out onto the field and on the parking lot, and started to work through sections of the show. And as we were working through sections of the show, we started to then add orchestration to the color guard choreography. So it was almost like working writing to a film score, but instead of it being a movie, it was the color guard choreography. And that, you know, having somebody give you the opportunity to just play with that within the context of the music, but then also to line it up with the visual was really really extraordinary. I'll always remember that particular moment.
I guess maybe you should make mention, well, more than mention of Cesario, because he kind of kept somehow, especially in the early years, I think, but kept it all under one roof. And he showed up in '81. Actually, Angelica summoned me to his apartment, and that's how it worked. And it was like, you'll be here Tuesday night. I'm like, oh, okay. And he introduced me to Michael. We went to dinner and went back to his place, and then Michael proceeded to explain to me everything that was wrong with the Cadets in '81. And he was dancing across the floor and explained to me the difference between turquoise, and I'm just like, I just sat there the whole time, you know. And I think we got his brother on the phone, Greg, and I'm like, I didn't know what was happening. And you know, I knew the guy I knew he knew something, but it was nothing that I knew anything about. But I knew we needed help too in '81, so he came in, and that's kind of when things got started, because he started leaning for the core to get, you know, generate effect. He started changing the Elks Parade we did back then. He made us change the end of the tune. I remember having a meeting. This Donnie Van Doren taught me everything I needed to know about managing people. The drill guy was there, and Donnie's like, you know, we got to bring the horn line in closer. You know, we got to do something so that the end of this thing works. And I won't say he was teaching drill then, but the guy said, he goes, he's another 27th Lancer alumnus, and he goes, there's nothing that can be done. There's just nothing that can be done. And Donnie, we were sitting at a hill in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Donnie just said, well, I guess we'll have to get somebody that can do something about that. And I was like, you know, and everybody stopped, and the next day, this guy fixed it, you know. So, you know, I was like, oh, that's how you do that, you know. So, and of course, Donnie used those tricks on me in reverse, but, you know, I don't think I'd know anybody as pointed as him. But, you know, then after '81, then Michael, you know, he had a lot to do with that. And I think in the early years, George and Michael got along really well. And I think as the years got on, everybody started learning a lot about each other's stuff. Because in the beginning, I don't think Michael would ever say anything about drill, but George would never say anything about turquoise. But after about a couple years, then everybody was talking about everything. And then it got a little more challenging to kind of put the shows together. In the beginning, everybody kind of held their place a little bit, I think. So.
Well, I think, I mean, you know, when you bring up Michael, I had never been around a person quite like Michael in a lot of ways. I mean, he was flamboyant. I knew a lot of those types, but he really knew a lot, and it was intimidating. You know, especially me, Peggy, George. We were street kids. We came from a different place. We didn't. It was almost like you weren't supposed to know the kind of things that Michael knew. It would be, and he would just be able to talk. I mean, you could have a conversation about anything. Cars, it didn't matter. Turquoise, he ran the gamut.
Well, he knew the musical side too. He knew everything.
He knew everything.
He knew everything.
He knew
everything.
He knew.
Yeah.
He's the only one that could really speak to every other person on the staff in their language. He could speak to drill. He could speak to color guard. He could speak to dance. He could speak to music.
Yep.
And if the bus was broken down, he told you what would need to be fit. He really
And cooked.
He cooked a mean pancake.
fabulous. You probably wouldn't bring it up. But you know, I mean, really. I think for most of us who have gone on to programming jobs in one way or another, you know, there's not a day I go by programming for cadets now that, you know, somehow I'm brought back to Michael and his ability to bring all the pieces together. He wasn't just the visual guy and then the music guy, and then they tried. He was really the one in the middle. He was the one that, when we say, you know, the color guard and the pit going together, I think some of that just came from Michael's ability to put things together that you would never, you know, drums did the drums, drill did the drill, music did the drill, and then they got thrown together, and, you know, except for a couple of great chords, you know, Pete Emmons with Santa Clara that actually were coordinating. Coordination was, you know, do you like this music? Sure, let's play it. Okay, you write it, throw it together, and hopefully someone will clap. You know, Michael taught me everything as far as, you know, how do you think about a program.
Well,
I think Michael, Michael also was the first to get away from uniforms for color guard and really did costumes. I mean, it was just amazing what he did. The first year in '82 was just with the prairie skirts and the thing in their hair. It was very different for me.
And we
But
were
it was
embarrassed,
just-
actually.
Well, no, at first
We were
it was like,
afraid.
all right, what's this guy, you know, I guess this guy must know what he's doing, but if it was my way, I would have gone back to what I was familiar with. And I think that was also
Sure.
the beauty of the whole thing, is that we were like, all right, we'll go with it, and it certainly worked. But he was not afraid, and I still say turquoise to this day, and people look at me and go, what? I said, would you like my turquoise shirt? And they're like, what the hell?
Well, I remember his
Turquoise,
first time we sat down at a diner, and it was you, me, and George, and Michael, and he brought out the sketches for a flag, which I didn't know you did those. You went to the sewing place, you picked out some colors, you brought it over to May's house and told her to sew it. You know, and he had these drawings and colors and pencils and line, and, you know, he's describing it, but I never knew these colors, raspberry and chartreuse, and I remember it was described, this one flag was raspberry and lemon, and me and Peggy would said, sounds good, it tastes good anyway. Yes, can't do anything else with this flag.
I mean, he really made that transition, I think, with even the '82 Corps into the '83. Because if the '82 color guard wasn't there, I don't think '83 would have been possible as far as what the color guard did with that contribution. Because up until then, even in '82, we kind of played it safe with Rocky Point. You know, did that kind of old-time drum corps. The color guard was, you know, did the equipment, and then all of a sudden, poof, we go into shawls and they're prancing around, and it was beautiful. And that was Greg Cesario as well. And but I'm not sure if that would have happened unless we had that initial.
No, not without Michael. None of that. The whole ambiance of the Corps was Michael Cesario.
He sat me down once, and he was always good about, you're the director, and he always, you know, I didn't really have a choice, but I felt like I had a choice, you know. And he sat me down once for hours, explained to me how we were going to market ourselves as this all-American Corps. We were just going to get Santa Clara and push them out of the way, and push Phantom out of the way, and drive ourselves up the middle. I'm like, sounds good, you know. I mean, I was thinking about, what are we playing this year? You know, we're playing Bernstein, you know, and the Mass. I never heard any of that. I mean, I don't even know if he brought that up or Jimmer, but I wasn't even thinking about the next year or the next year or the next year, and he was already 6-7 years out. You know, which made things like, you know, we get Jeremiah and stuff. That wasn't a big pick because it had been sitting there for years, you know, or 3 years, 4 years. And
We just weren't wise enough to do it first.
I didn't understand. I tell you, when I played Jeremiah in '85, I said, well, this is a really good piece, because I've been playing that for you for years. I don't think my ears could handle it yet. It was like,
Well, you know,
is
it's
that?
interesting with Michael, and as I've been involved in a variety of different things over my career since the Cadets, with some great marketing people and great PR people and big corporations and in small areas. One of the true bright minds of marketing and PR is Michael Cesario. I would put him up against any of these other guys that I've worked with over the years, because I learned a lot, just being with him, and about staying on message and how you get that point across, making sure that you keep putting the same thing out and same thing out and same thing out, and when people start bringing it back to you, then that you've been successful in communicating that.
He did the Beyond, that was the Beyond Tradition thing, which rolled for about 10 years, and the G with the thing, that was all his,
Well, plus it was,
all his. YEA was his thing, that was his,
Right.
he gave that to me.
It was the whole, what the core was going to be. I mean, you could, and any group of people can take West Side Story and play West Side Story. In each group, there was the Anaheim way. There was, and it would be West Side Story. But really, his concept on top of everything was that the Cadets would be class, elegant, sophisticated. He had all this list of words, all of which I was like.
Where's a dictionary?
Well, because those are, I mean, like I said, where we came from, if you went around saying, I'm sophisticated, you could get your head knocked. They were like, you don't use these words. It was scary to me. I didn't know what he meant by it. But he said them all the time. Yeah, this is what the drum corps is going to be. Well, luckily, Jim Prime wrote very classy, sophisticated charts, and Zingali's, drills and Greg Cesario's, the way he choreographed, played into it. But it was really his deciding that was the marketing of that's who the Cadets would be. They would be this all-American group that was classy and sophisticated, and that's what people bought into big time. They loved that. He created a core that people loved to love.
Yeah.
We got meaner as the years went on because we got tired of being, that's where the Jeremiahs and some of the darker shows came in. Was, it was like, all right, enough of this milk and cookie stuff. But those first years, it was really his leadership in that. And I think once you kind of figured out what he meant by it, after '82, I think we all was like, kind of know what he meant. It led to the way you would start, right? From then on.
Well, where did the mask come from in '83? Does anybody? I honestly don't remember. It had to be Michael or
I think
Jim.
it was either Jim and Mike. I think it was.
Because none of us ever.
I mean,
We showed up and it was here.
my job was easy. We were terrible, so we just we just tried to get better.
I knew you were the guy to. I knew I was the guy to not do the drum line. You had a meeting at that house we lived in Teaneck, and the technique book. He pulls out this book. It's like this thick for the staff. I'm like looking across the room, going, man, my technique book was 1 page. It's like play.
Here are the exercises.
Check patterns. We're going to write the parts based on these. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? No wonder we sucked. Before then. So, but yeah, you're right. You're probably right. You really didn't. You were just kind of like peripherally sitting on the side, just tell me what to do.
An absolute facilitator.
Yeah, you had so much going on.
I remember more so in '84 because it was the show was so difficult, so hard, and we had taken whatever was going on in '83 and even did it more so in '84 and more extreme, more often.
Right.
And in fact, I remember Unks at the end of the season, Unks like, do you know we never made that set in America ever? We never made it. You could have said something. But I just remember, this is a crazy thing to remember, but sitting up at night in that van, and I would sit there and I would just be awake trying to figure out what we had to do the next day, in large part to accommodate the drill.
Right.
Because of everything that was split, how you deal with the music, all of the running around and what's going on at the changes of direction, trying to write fast, because that was something that I certainly wasn't used to. Those tempos,
Right.
It's a whole different vocabulary, and writing from being positioned behind the horn line, and being kind of back far. What can you write that's going to actually speak and have some kind of an effect and communicate? But it was just night after night on that van, just writing it down.
And actually, I think a
It's unbelievable.
big turning point for the percussion was when Angst came out, and because
He was the first guy out that did it.
he was the first one, so he'd been through this program from way before even any of us got there. But he was in the line when we were trying to figure the stuff out.
right.
Like all of us, when we marched, it was like, I think I know what to do, but who do you tell?
Well, the running joke was that we would never be able to do the things that we asked the kids to do.
Yeah.
That was the point. But I think his coming out. I remember in '85, before the season were out, wherever one of the schools we stayed at before the season, and George, and like you say, we took ideas from the year before and that we thought were a little dangerous and figured out we could do it. So the next year you went
Take it,
further.
yeah.
So Jeremiah was obviously the furthest extension of probably of any year I've ever taught in drum corps compared to what you did the year before. And Jeremiah was still probably the hardest production musically ever done, I think.
And it was a natural extension of what had come before, because I don't think that, I think we had to mature to that point, both
Sure.
as writers and designers and with the kids and everything else. And certainly on the percussion side, we were just beginning to figure out what was possible, not only what was possible as it related to the movement, but also what was possible in terms of the tone and the timbre and the things that we could use and the instrumentation and how we would go out to look for the effects to really bring Jeremiah to life on the field. We did a little bit, of the experimentation with timbre, with the pit and the battery in '84 with some of the things that we did in West Side Story, particularly in the solo, where we were doing a lot of experiments with the timbre. But we took that to the nth degree with Jeremiah, with the battery, where everything from where you play on the drum, bass drummers with open attack, closed attacks on the mallet instruments, woods, then shifting to all metallics, trying to create the intensity of the music. I mean, '85 was where all those pieces, at least for me, came together, and the drum line was playing at an extraordinarily high level. I mean, all levels of the corps were evenly matched at a really high level with very challenging music that, to me, is still my favorite year.
Yeah, well, I think because of that, because it was the ultimate achievement for us as a group. We knew that we had, for all of the talk of the other years, you can actually look back and go, it really wasn't that hard stuff, just no one had done it, so you had to figure out how to do it. But once you figured it out, it really wasn't that hard. I mean, Jeremiah was that hard right now. It would be hard to teach now, it would be hard to get anyone to do now. And I remember, we were talking about techniques. We were at such an extreme, we took such an extreme risk with the percussion line. There was no technique at that time yet to how to move a drum line. People weren't doing a crab yet. It was not done. People followed. So I remember, there was a part when me and Thom were on the field, and he was like, I don't know what are we going to do here? They can't twist their body. They can't turn if they fit, So we just started playing with, whatever, and then, we just did the crab step. It became a legend. It was like the big thing. And all of a sudden, now the cadets drum. It wasn't just where they were in the field, it was how much space they could take up, because the crab allowed a drum line to take up a great deal of space, because other than that, if you went sideways, you went step together. You could do a couple of things, that was it. So, I think that just that one innovation in technique changed more in drum corps than anything. It was just and it was a way to figure out how to make a drum line take up space, move.
And it's interesting, when you say that whole period was a cascading evolution of these new and innovative ways, whether it was crabbing technique, whether it was how you play the instrument, the instruments themselves. I mean, we were working with manufacturers to create the instruments to achieve the effects musically that we wanted to achieve. I mean, these were, you know, and from the implements that they played with to the, you know, new instruments themselves that hadn't been created before. You know, that side of it, looking back, you didn't really understand it at the time, but looking back 20 years later, the innovation that took place in that 3-year period and the impact on the activity, at least from my perspective, has not happened. I mean, there was a quantum change in the activity, you know, pre-cadets, post-cadets, 1985, and we haven't seen that same kind of quantum change to the activity since that point in time. And I think that's somewhat of a tribute to all the creative minds in the group that came together, and the freedom to experiment, to do the things that we were able to do.
I think a lot of the compositions that they started with, though, at that time drove you to that direction, because you were dealing with material that people had not played before. And if you were trying to do some kind of justice to it or use it in terms of drum corps, you were almost forced to try to do something different, because you couldn't make it sound the same way as the music people were playing 2 or 3 years before that. It helped push you in that direction.
Well, what had you written before we threw Jeremiah at you? Had you even done a band show?
That is most crazy things.
The accidental arranger.
Yeah, when I was in high school, Glenn Edwards was my band director, and he was very encouraging of us to write things for the groups there. So I had, you know, I was writing jazz band charts, I was writing marching band charts, some of which I still have, like, in my basement, and I get them out and laugh my head off looking at this stuff. But he would kind of encourage us to do that. Then at Westchester, it was the same thing. Dr. Wells, when we were in there, like, the students ran a lot of that band, and I got to write some things for there. And in '84, when Jimmer was writing the book, I had brought some things to play in the wintertime at the camps to kind of get his input on it. And of course, Jimmer's input was he'd look at it and go, that looks really good. And it could be the worst thing in the world, and he'd never say a bad thing about it. So, you know, I did those things, and then, you know, '85, I think you had asked me first if I wanted to do it. And I was terrified out of my mind. It's like, okay, I can maybe run this program, but I'm not going to write. I can't do this. And we went through...
in 1 year, because Jimmer and Donnie left after '84.
Yeah.
Donnie's mom passed away, and it was a problem. So taking the whole thing on at one shot, at 20, whatever, 3.
And you had asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said no. And then I kept bringing charts in for the camps, because we went through a series of trying arrangers, and we'd come to a camp and there would be no show music. We would change the show. We'd come.
Well, we decided we were going jazz.
Yeah.
First circle.
Because
Christmas.
because of the
Christmas.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Christmas show.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you remember the guy who was supposed to do the jazz stuff. Me and you and I went over to his house one night.
I remember that.
And you called me
after having a little. We shouldn't have been driving, probably.
We had to get ourselves prepared.
We went over his house, told him if he didn't have charts, like by the next morning, it was over.
I mean, we're into doing these additional percussion camps.
It had to be January.
George was later than that.
Was it?
We were. You called me in March.
From March.
There was no music. That's why I said, George, we got to be done talking about this. We got a percussion camp for 2 weeks. We got no music.
There's no music.
You called me from Las Vegas at a DCI meeting, and you said, I'm going to ask you one last time. If you want to do this. And I said, I was so frustrated by that point, I said, yes, here's what I know. I have guys like Jimmer, who if I go to him, I know he'll help me if I get myself in trouble. And I locked myself in my little apartment in Westchester.
That's how we got to Jeremiah. It was like, what do you want to write? Because we weren't going to make you write First Circle.
And I think
we did learn. Didn't we learn? We must have learned some of First Circle. I think we did.
No, we had some.
We had something.
We had the. We had
did it since then.
Yeah. But we did it. We did it in '84. Because we had done the arrangements, and at that point in time the Pit had gotten a reputation for doing these post-show concerts in the parking lot, because the great thing about the Pits then is that you could, because they weren't moving, you know, and once they had their notes down, we had so much time, we actually had a whole series of other songs that we would work on just to help them with their own technique. It turned, you know, to a certain degree, it turned into a summer music percussion camp for these kids, because they would come in and be able to learn new techniques, and that's how we began to write arrangements. The kids would do their own arrangements, you know, to take it, you know, to try to work on some things. Michael Scoras, you know, was able to arrange Candide in '84, which won them the individuals. It then set the stage for us to do Candide in '85. But
That's
then
funny. We never did individuals. We never have since then.
did it
We
one,
were
the one
standing in
time.
the parking
That's
lot,
right.
and
Yeah.
we're loading the truck up after prelims, and you were the kid. I don't know if you sent the kids to suck up to me or whatever. They're like, "Can we please go? It's right there." And I'm looking at the building there. I'm like, "Right there?" They're like, "Yeah, right there." I said, "Go ahead." So I just hung. I didn't even go watch. I hung it outside. They went in. They rolled all their stuff in. They came out 15 minutes later, loaded it up. And they won. I don't even. You couldn't do that today because I think you have to register in advance. But
Oh,
they
yeah.
just walked in and did it.
But it was-
They probably changed the rules after that. It's like, they just
What was
walked
interesting,
in.
though, is that with First Circle, I mean, First Circle to me is still one of the great, you know, pieces of music of all time, and it's one of the great regrets I think that I'll always have, is never being able to arrange for that, you know, in this particular venue. That being said, the fact that Jeremiah came forward, you know, and ended up being the piece that we did, was really brilliant, because I think that was as much a learning experience and learning as an arranger, you know, and working with Michael when he was writing, because we would sit down and really collaborate on who has lead where,
Yeah.
and how do we transition from the horn to the battery to the pit, you know, and how then do we, you know, really emphasize certain aspects of the music, because Jeremiah was so percussive, and had such great percussion writing to begin with, to build upon, that it was really an extraordinary opportunity. But the learning that we had from '83 to '84, you know, then set the stage for us to really go crazy in the collaborative effort for
You know what's
for
fun about
Jeremiah.
that too is that you know, having March in the chord and, you know, being around these guys writing in '84 and watching what they do. You know, George Zingali loved the music, and you know, I still don't know if I've ever seen anybody as much as he does. The big picture is one thing, to represent the drill with the big picture and what I'm seeing from the second deck, but every element in the drill had to be staged just right. So if these 6 people were playing the right thing, you had to see them as well as hear them. So when I was writing that, I kept thinking, George is going to need to put these people someplace. So if in the next measure I change and make this choice, he doesn't have time to get them there. And I found myself thinking about those things, not like you would sit down thinking about writing a chart. It's not just about the music, it's whether he can do that. And he went crazy. In one section there, we split the horn line up into 2 different groups, and the instrumentation was not, there was no kind of sense to it other than we were looking for the 2 most different sounding groups that we could get out of 4 brass instruments that you were allowed to use. And he
4
found
brass instruments with 2 valves.
yeah, and he found a way to make that work, because the music was important, and all those people were staged correctly, the big picture was right, the individual was right, and that was fun. It was a whole different reason to write, because of a guy like him and what he felt about the music.
All right. Just running through the years. Start with John Blair when he tripped.
Oh, jeez, John Blair.
The chord had gone fast, and they were going to go back and judge this thing that we never cleaned, ever. And they were all standing there ready to come in, and he starts moving that way. The whole championship's in, and he tripped over the cable.
Cable from the TV.
And he fell right to the ground, dropped his pad and everything. And
the gun went off.
And we're like cheering. He gets up and he looks back at us, and then he looks, and the gun goes boosh. It's like, then we cheered even louder. And it was like, so
Wow.
he never forgot it. 20 years later, he's ticked at us.
He's rough, man. I can't say that you
All right.
ever had a good shake with him.
No.
Not one show.
No, well, wait. I don't know if I should be on tape, but I called Angelica, called Chip in. I said, you got to get this guy off our back. This is like 10 shows ago. And Don's like, listen to me. He goes, okay. And the guy judged field drums the next 10 shows. He was there every night. And Don's like, he's going to be there. You got the message, right? I'm like, all right, we got the message. And I remember talking to you going, Tom, he's going to be there. This is it. He's just, you know, Angelica was doing us a favor, kind of going, here, you're going to have to figure it out. So good luck. and we barely got by.
What I remember about that is, that's when we began to make some little adjustments to deal with the fact that he was going to be there. And one of the things that we worked with the pit on going into finals was that in certain parts of the show, we had an idea of where, more likely or not, the execution judge was going to line up. And I think that it was the end of gospel sermon, and the drum line comes forward, and we know that the execution judge is going to be standing right in front of the pit so that he could see the battery and try to get a bead on what the battery was doing. So Dave Lightsey was one of the kids in the pit at the time. He was playing China Boy cymbals. We took 2 China Boy cymbals, put straps on them so that he could bang them together to make the accents, and made sure that at that point in time he knew where the execution judge was. And we told him to be sure that he pointed his cymbals toward the execution judge. So at the end of gospel, the drum line's playing their
that
tails off.
sextuplet thing,
Yep.
which they could never make
Yep,
it
they're
through,
playing the sextuplet thing, and
Barely.
he's there. And of course, where Blair was, or where the judges would stand, you couldn't hear anything except
Right.
the China Boy cymbals. And the hands looked good, everything looked good. You didn't know whether they were clean or not. And it was one of the things, adjustments that we made, toward the end of the season, and with some of the writing then.
Well,
Or
stupidly, I was making part changes in Miami. And I remember Zingale coming out, man. He was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "We can't play this stuff. We've really yet to play it well." And he was absolutely pissed. he really was. He says, "This is not what you should be doing." I said, "Man, at this point, it's the only thing I know to do."
Well, did you know, since we're on drums, did you actually think, or in your head, that they were going to get better every year, or that there was a plan to all this, or?
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
you also knew there was an upper limit, like in '84. You're not surprised that they were whatever they were, 8th or 9th in drums, or were you disappointed? You thought they'd be better than that by then?
No, because I think
You were disappointed when we'd be laying there at that Dominican school at nights. You'd be yelling at nobody.
I think that it was.
Remember some of those nights? He'd just be screaming about the kids, man. After like a 20-hour rehearsal, you just hear Hannum yelling. There's nobody there. He's just yelling. I'm like, "Good day, Thom."
I was always driven by, there was such excellence around what we were doing with the people and what we were aspiring to do with the programs, that it just was a case of trying to keep up. That's all.
Yeah.
So I always felt that at some point we're going to get this to happen. And as Marc pointed out, we always did great for general effect. We always did great for percussion ensemble, because those were the things that were related to the design. We just had to catch up to how to do the design, and that's where really Thom and Glenn, having Crosby come in too, was huge, because he knew what a great sound was, having played in the Blue Devils and being taught by Float and all. And those guys in 1 year turned it around. And I distinctly remember, I know this is jumping out of the sequence, but I remember the first week the drum line moved in. I was not there. Ungst had him by himself. Crosby wasn't there. And it was just the battery, and we came in Friday. And it was like a different drum line after 5 days. I'd never seen anything like that. That kind of transformation in my life, and boy, what those guys were able to do with him was amazing.
Well, Glenn, we never had a good Thom player in the Cadets, and we weren't. None of us were Thom players,
No.
so we were teaching ourselves, going. And Glenn came in. It's like, oh, that's how you play this drum, So then, now we have Thom players like crazy. It's like they grow on trees. It's like every year I'm like, geez. But yeah, that was the best move you ever did, get somebody else. All respect to the kids at marching cadets or crossmen, but they were not like these guys out on the West Coast.
No.
They couldn't drum like that.
Not even close.
So, I remember '84. I always tell the story of Dave Lorenzi, one of my best friends. But he judged at World Open, I guess it was then, and in prelims he gave us a 10-0, and he was on ensemble, 9-9 maybe, out of 10. And he went on the field that night, and he gave us a 8-9. I'm like, what happened? He goes, well, you know, because we had the split show with either side. He goes, well, I'm only allowed to judge what I hear and see. He goes, I can't even take into account the fact that these people are drumming over here. Now, I know it's really hard, but I'm not going to take it into account. So a lot of the things that you guys do when I'm on the field, I don't count it because I don't see it as difficult because I don't really know what's going on over there. Maybe they're not playing tonight. I'm like, what? I went nuts. I came out, I had Angelica by the arm. I'm like, Thom, you got to help me with this guy. And he was a friend of mine. I'm just like, you got to do this. But that's, you know, as we went through the judging thing, we had a lot of times like that where guys would just say, I can't give you credit for things like, you know, I can't give you credit for this. You're out of step, or you're this, you're that, or there's no straight line. How can I judge you? You're not in a straight line.
I used to go at it with Gene Monticelli all the time because, you know, the way a visual judge positioned themselves would decide how they could give out the mark. It's just where, like you said, where they stand decides what they're going to see, and only what they see is what goes down. You know, and after a while, I mean, that's where the game comes in. People know where to stand or not to stand. So you can tell when someone is out to give you a number or not by where they stand. Especially back then, because you studied. I mean, you knew where every field judge was going to be. You knew how they were going to judge you, where they were going to judge you. And the minute they varied from that, you know, it was either to give you a number or not, and you knew that.
I was still doing the cadets, and you were doing the Crossman, 82 at CYO Nationals. You remember that? And we beat them in drums, and we come off. You know, we won the show by whatever, something. You know, the core was good, but our drum line was lagging. But we beat them in drums. We come off, and he's screaming at me. He's up in the stands. I'm crossing the field. I guess anybody can get a number. Screaming. And he's on a fence shaking it like a wild man. I'm like, you know, because Rodney Goodhart. And Rodney, he got in front of the cadets and just cruised. He knew it was coming, and you know, I mean, I'm sure he walked for everybody, but he took a walk at just the right time. You know, and he was known for that. I mean, he used to look forward to having him because it was kind of a game. It was like fun. But I never forget. Can't believe I ever hired you after that. I mean, you called me every name in the book, you know, and it's shaking the fence at me. I'm just like, let's get out of here, you know. So, but yeah, you're right. It's because drum and when you had Watina and Blair as because there were two guys on the field back those days, you'd see it on the sheet. You'd be like. Kids would know. You try not to show the kids, but you'd be like, oh no, you know. And then the kids would eventually know. They'd see them, and they're like, oh. They'd get under the drums. They'd stand. You know, we get in these forms. Like, thank God we started moving because they would get on. You know, when the lines would sit, they would just get underneath the drums and put their ears up. You're like you can't hear from out. It's like we're making enough mistakes already. So.
Go search.
Well, and the great thing, particularly for the execution judges. The advantage that we did have was the fact that the drum line was moving, the corps was moving so much, and the color guard was swooping in from wherever. Some of those guys were afraid to go out on the field.
Then we'd get slap in and whatever it was called then, exposure or whatever, because they couldn't get in there. Then we started getting that one.
That started to come
we
later.
can't give you credit because we can't get there.
We can't get there. Well, you can get there.
Yeah. And then you started with those little meetings beforehand. They'd ask for a map, you know, but like I don't know how they ever thought it was going to help. You got 30 seconds. Okay, go here, go here, go here. You know, it got to a point when I would say, don't go out there. Just because some of the years, George, well, you know, you took over later on. It just kept getting closer and closer. They were just part of the. You know, it kind of was a drum line, and you'd leave a hole for them, and it kind of. But then eventually, it just became. There was no room, no room. And so if you didn't know where you were going, I mean, even if you knew where you were going, like if you would stop, I'd go out there and I'd be kind of cleaning. I'd stop for a second to hear something and you get a tuba to the head because you didn't have the time to just sit there and stare and kind of listen like the old days.
Well, I think with 93, and then in the subsequent years, but it really became obvious in 93, at least for me, the corps marched so well that they made it look easy, and you really didn't know how difficult it was until something happened that reminded you that they were moving at great speed and a high degree of difficulty because they made it look and sound so effortless. And then in Whitewater, at the Whitewater finals, was that 84?
Yeah.
When they were doing the end of the show, and then all of a sudden one guy goes down, and because they're moving backwards with the horns facing toward the audience, you don't know if the guy behind you went down, and the guy behind went down, and so did 4 or 5 other guys, and I don't know where that dented mellophone is that didn't, I think it was fortunately the only casualty of that.
Well, that one kid, he didn't march again. He ended up having to go home.
Did he?
He didn't think he was hurt, but he was hurt. Yeah.
Yeah.
This kid who actually, well, it wasn't, he didn't take the kid who tripped the guy or what have you, hit his foot. That was, then the next morning he's like, we're taking out all the pass-throughs. And I'm like, we sat there for hours. He would not stop.
No, actually.
Or was it you?
No,
like,
no,
we're
it was
taking out the
him.
passwords.
Well,
I'm like,
we all had our roles. But yeah, his was, that's it, we have to take everything out, we have to take the thing. And I was like, no, and actually we were supposed to have a day off. And I just wanted the drum corps for an hour. And you know, I think I know what to do. And I was like, oh, all right, yeah, sure. And I remember we took the whole drum, color guard, drums, the horn line, put them in a block, pace and a half by a pace and a half, and we did 100-yard sprints at 200. People falling down, getting back up, falling down to the point was till you figure out that you can get down and get back up. It's not a big deal. I had to get the fear out. They were petrified.
yeah.
So we spent, and I remember we spent like a good hour, solid hour, back and forth, running, falling. And the next show, I think, was Erie, Pennsylvania. It's wet field, raining. And, you know, that night, everyone felt the field was a mess, you know, but we had worked so much at it that they just knew how to fight. They figured out how to fight it. Because it was the thing of, you know, once your balance goes, you just you give up. And that's, you know, but instead of, you know, the give up thing of we got to take everything out, like, no, you don't do it like that, you fight it.
I was watching it, outside, but at the press box, and I didn't see it. But the place was up for grabs. You know, everybody's cheering. All of a sudden, it was like total silence. And I was still like, I didn't know what happened. And out of the corner of my eye, I kind of saw it. I was like, oh.
But in some ways, it did made people realize how difficult everything was at this cold.
That was the first point from that 83 to mid 84 where they're human. It's like, all right, they're not perfect. They're not this uncatchable. You know, they could fall. But I remember, you know, you do silly things, but they had the box underneath where the judges are. You know, the stats could go. I remember seeing it. You know, it's just, you know, the typical any movie you've ever seen. It was just slow motion. The whole thing's going down, and everything's quiet.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I just remember screaming out, "Did you see that judge trip them?" I didn't know what to do. You know, blame it on the judge. That's what we're good at.
Was that the same?
Who was nowhere near.
Was that the same critique where we all went nuts? Is that where?
Yeah, George was reading out of Ayn Rand and the individual, and
Jimmer was yelling in from the outside.
Yep,
you should not be around children ever again.
Yes.
That's when I'm just looking around, going, this is not going well. So every caption had somebody in a corner just screaming. I'm like, and that's what we just said, we're not going to critiques anymore.
No.
We're doing ourselves harm. We couldn't control ourselves anymore. So I would just go in and say, hey, how you doing? So, and then everybody would tell me what everybody else said. He goes, actually, I remember when in Montreal, like 2 shows later, I went in, Teddy was there, he was the head judge, he goes, you don't have to worry about the critique, everybody's been talking about you all night. You know? And I'm like, okay. So yeah, we kind of lucky, but then we ended up, because I was just looking at those recasts, we lost that show, even though we still got the 10-0 marching that everybody talks about, because we fell down.
Oh, no, I know.
How can you win? Yeah.
And then looking the other way.
But we lost Santa Clara a bunch of by 2 points. We're pretty close to the end of the year.
Yeah.
Wasn't exactly what I thought it was. Like 2 points, and then we tied them at Allentown prelims. They 2-pointed us at night, and we tied them at U.S. Open.
U.S. Open was the change.
It's 84 or 85?
Was that 85?
85, yeah.
80, somebody beat us. Well, no.
We had
Hannum up in DCI North, they
DCI
beat
North.
us
Yeah.
back to back.
It was like that one, and then
And
DCI.
Blue Devils beat us in Lansdale,
Right,
where we
those-
walked on the.
those three.
Remember that was real high grass. We walked on. I remember you guys got on. We're doomed.
Yeah.
I mean, the grass was like really
Yeah.
thick, and we're like, it's over.
Yeah, and then
And we
the-
did. We lost.
In the Whitewater. Those were the three.
And then and then I didn't know. Oh, that's the one I didn't know. Santa Clara at prelims was This doesn't even happen anymore. 3.8 behind us.
Right.
And they only ended up like 6/10. They were third. Blue Devils were 10th, but they went from like 3.5, almost 4 points to like 6/10 between prelims and finals. You know, and that doesn't happen anymore. So, but yeah, that was well. See, that's the year. I mean, I guess the negative side, all those bus issues. Yeah, we bought our own buses. I didn't know how to buy buses. I mean, I just knew we couldn't afford to rent them anymore. I mean, we were spending back those days $100,000 to rent buses. So we bought these things. I remember we bought them up in Massachusetts, and we're driving out. I was driving one. I didn't have a license or anything, but I was driving one. And we're going about, no radios or anything. We're going about 10 miles, and I had to pull over to the side. The other guys come up, what's wrong? I go, how do you get this thing out of first gear? And I've been driving for 10 miles. It was against the law then, but you'd get a $25 fine if you didn't have an articulated license. But we went on the road. We actually, there were times we had one bus left. Atlanta, I called DCI. We pulled out of 2 shows because we just couldn't get there. We just couldn't go anymore. We couldn't go. And we just stopped, tried to get everything fixed, and then I rented buses. They just sat everything and tried to get it fixed so we could get to the end of the year.
Actually, 84 we never rehearsed. Once we got on the road,
Yeah.
Oh,
I remember showing up at a show site, and people would be showing up to start the show, and we'd jump off the bus, find the field,
Yeah.
spray it, and get an hour in, and that was half of 84 was, what the Corps ended up being was nothing like any other cadet year because they didn't rehearse. All the other Corps rehearsed. That if it wasn't for that talent,
I know what the famous
it was the hardest one, probably one of the hard, if not the hardest show. Had to be the most talented because we never rehearsed.
I know what the Santa Clara was, 84. I got in your good graces because we got to the Columbia show, South Carolina, and there weren't any lines. And
Right.
you had me by the ear. You're like, you're not going on. We're not. I'm like, I have to go on. Like I've been a director for 1 year. He goes, no. So I'm like, all right. So I went down. I told the chief judge or whoever. I said, we're not going on unless you repaint that field. And Gail got crazy. He's like, you can't do that, you young punk, and screaming and yelling.
It was like because they were just coming up the field. They were going to go on right before us.
Yeah.
And I remember because I was right behind you, as always.
Yeah, yelling in my ear.
Yeah, of course. And I remember him saying, "You can't spray the field unless you do it before we get on." And now that's all I heard. So he said that. Now no one gave me the go-ahead. I just grabbed the stuff. We went on. We started spraying the field because he said, before he realized what he said or anyone else, we were spraying. And all of a sudden, Santa Clara starts marching on the 50, and I'm spraying the field. And there's Charlie Anderson, the major visual tech guy of all time, who obviously, we all had our competitive buddies that, the big guy from the other team, just screaming, what do you think you're doing? I just want to make sure you have a good job, Mr. Anderson. Want to make sure your coach does good tonight.
Yeah.
Because, but again, those days, there was so many things that didn't get into consideration. You could show up at a show and there would be no yard lines and no hashes, and you just accepted it, but back then, because of the shows we did,
That didn't affect anybody else right then, not for a few years after that.
I'm saying that the point was it didn't really matter because you kind of went up and down and you used the cones, and a lot of people still rehearsing on fields where they just used cones.
Yeah.
Hadn't progressed that far really, even 85. But for us it was, you really had that sense someone could get hurt. It wasn't about, I'm not trying to win a show, but it was like the show in wherever in Columbus or the baseball field where
Yeah.
I brought
My first show as director,
What
I got
happened?
arrested because we go on the field. It was raining and it was
AstroTurf
there were-
baseball field.
but there was dirt at the bases, but the rest of it was all turf. So we're going on. The guys, they're like, whatever you do not move any turf. And they're like pointing at us. I go, yes sir, yes sir. So we go out. I tell everybody, don't move the turf. So I'm on the far right hand side walking around, course coming on, and I look over and I see Sully pulling this thing out of the dugout, and I'm like, I'm dead. And I can't stop him. It's too late. It's like he's already on the other side. And next thing I know, I see the guy running the show walking towards me with a policeman. I got my cuffed. I'm cuffed. They're walking me back. Michael Cesario's running next to me, going, "Where's the money? Where's the money?" I'm like, "Oh God!" So I had to call, and I tried to call Passione and answer. So I called. I don't know why. It must have been the vice president or something. I called Freddie Martin. I had to tell him the whole story and what happened, and he got somebody on the phone. So we got banned. We weren't allowed in that stadium again. So in fact, was it the next year? We couldn't go to finals. We won prelims at the U.S. Open, and we couldn't go to finals because finals used to be moved to Columbus back in those days, and we weren't allowed to come back. We were banned from the stadium. But it was my first show. I had to call Passione like, "Hi, how are you?" Or my first DCI show, because back then you did DCE or whatever it's called, and then we did the DCI thing. So it was my first show as a DCI director, and I'm arrested because he's moving the stuff. I'm like,
but they did a good job.
Yeah.
I didn't see a thing. I was just like standing there with the guy next to me, and then as soon as everybody was
Were
gone,
you trying to cover the pitcher's mound, or?
It was the it was
second
actually,
base, I think, or one of those.
Well, I forget which way the field was to the stadium. I think it was first base, and it was it was pouring out all day. At night it was fine, and it was this much water in it. It was if you stuffed in it, you were gone. You didn't. So, and of course, there was in my whatever. I know there was a section of show where like the Z pull or something back right over it. It was one of those. So it was, I mean, it wasn't a question for me. To go out there and listen.
Do they still have shows on baseball fields?
Oh yeah.
Nowadays?
Occasionally.
Really?
Yeah.
Not usually not big shows, but
I don't think in that stadium.
Oh, there's always that one in Buffalo with the pitcher mound over there on the first base side. Cavaliers went down there a couple of years ago. No, it's occasional, but it's funny. We don't, for all those years, and even to this day, we don't usually not go on. Like for bad fields, we'll even, we never really. As long as you made it close, like if it was, like you say with the kids, you just tell them it's okay. When they didn't know, that's when it was trouble. Like it was a wet field, but we didn't say anything, or nobody knew it was wet because it just rained there. That's when we usually got burned because they didn't know, they weren't expecting it. Our kids, they always joke around when the Corps goes on. Sometimes they'll just go, "Don't fall down." They're like, "Okay." They all laugh about it, but it's almost like out of sight they get caught because they're not thinking about it. But if you actually remind them sometimes, then they're more deliberate about all that kind of stuff. So,
was '84? Was that the year where we did like a crazy number of shows?
And actually, '83 we did 40. So we did 33 in the next year. Well, the season went back a week, so we lost a week. Now, actually, this year we do like 36 because it's up to the 13th or 14th again.
Because I just remember between the 3 years that 83, because it was first, there were so many firsts with that year. It was kind of exciting, and winning in Miami was really exciting. 84 was, we're just glad it's over, because it was such a hard year. I mean, there was a lot of great things that went on.
It was fun until we got going. Putting that show together was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Everything was great until we got on the road and we didn't eat.
I mean, we flipped the truck at the last rehearsal, next to last, up at that, it was a field. I remember you always standing on top screaming, but it was up in the New York State. We flipped the truck coming home, like the day before, 2 days before tour.
Yeah.
So you should have known then we were going to have a heck of a year.
It was hard. The tour was hard. So when we got to the end of it, it was great that they were successful. But I just remember walking away from that, going, we've got to find a way that we don't put, the staff and the kids through that again.
Brutal.
Because it really was a tough year. 85, and the other thing that made 84 tough was kind of okay. You won, the first year. There was a certain amount of expectation, not, I guess, so much from within the Corps, but certainly outside, you felt that there was an assumption, at that point that the Corps would win. So there was some element of pressure. 85, there was, for whatever reason, maybe it was new arranger with Michael coming on and doing the arranging, and that it was Jeremiah and that we were taking a lot of risks. There was more reward, I think, in 85 because there wasn't the same level of external expectation. We always had high expectations internally, but at the end of the season, it was a much more gratifying season.
Well, the Corps ran really well, 85. Don't ask me how yet, but we got into that odd-even thing. 80,
Those days.
Yeah, you're right.
85, 87, 89 were all fun years. 86, 84, not fun. 86, not fun. 88, not fun. You know, we got into that thing, and everybody would start that around me. Oh, it's an even year. It's going to be bad. I'm like, oh, God. I was so grateful when the Corps got good, like in 92. 92 started out as a bad year, you know, down the road, and then we turned it around at the end, and then that was kind of the end of it.
Actually, I think 85 was the year of, you know, we came out so bad and so far behind. That was the beginning of the cadet comeback. I mean, 83 and 84, we weren't doing no comebacks. We were good from the first. We're getting a 90 in June, the end of June, July.
We didn't have uniforms in 84. We were still stromping. Because we were in
So
Corps
85
jackets.
was
I got
the beginning
pictures of that somewhere.
You know, that comeback kind of thing that we kept on for a while.
Yeah, that Corps was ridiculous.
Yeah,
That
but I mean, it was that,
84.
like when you say the gratification, I think some of it was the other 2 years were kind of easy. I mean, easy in that we were good from the beginning. You felt like, okay, we're good and we're going to be good and, you know, we're going to be in there. Where 85 was, I mean, anyone could beat us almost.
And we were fighting. I mean, I remember writing 10-page letters when we were, wherever we were, was that in 85, was that in Whitewater? Or
That was
Madison.
I remember sitting in the bus just writing letters to whoever the judge coordinator was, why we should win. Because it was like, it was a crapshoot every night, depending on who was judging. A lot of guys didn't like us. You know, you would go to this, I played that for the kids last year, 7 minutes, no applause, really. You know, just 7 minutes of just like a little math puzzle almost, you know. And we were surprised we got applause for that big, whatever, V thing with the drums coming forward. But you never did. We only at the end when we were up high enough and they were clean enough, you know, that you see. But most of the time it was like deathly ill. You know,
Unplanned.
I remember that.
you go 7 minutes and go dun 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 dun. It's like, okay. So and then Candide kind of pulls out, you know. So.
But then there was, you know, some of the adjustments along the way. The one thing that I do remember is the very first time we put a section of Jeremiah together on the field. You know, full on marching, playing, and I think we were up sitting on top of the truck. You know,
I remember that up in
the very first time.
New York State. I could see the field, yeah.
And it was just, you know, and it was the first time through. It was just god awful, but there was also something neat about it because it's like, you know, we finally got it on the field. It's like now we've got something to work with.
Well, there was stuff talking about lessons. Then we never really figured out some of that stuff. They would just do it.
Right.
You would just say do it, and they do it. You go, that's it, and they all go look at you and go like that, okay, and they do it again. They do it again. You know, people are like, what'd you do? I'm like, I don't know. Like, because you would sit there on, you know, we were so new to it. You'd sit there and go, how's this going to work? You know, everybody had their theories, but really, we didn't know. We really didn't know. Some of that stuff in the beginning of Jeremiah, you just like, I don't know.
One thing that I remember, this was in '84 actually, and you know the whole idea of how we did ensemble was, well, you watch, you don't listen.
Yeah.
I mean, we were religious to a fault about it, you know, in a lot of ways. And I remember, well, you were pointing out that we would get off the bus at a show and we'd try to grab any moment we could to sort of practice something. And I remember we tried to play Maria with the horn line, the percussion and the horns tried to play Maria before a show.
Just standing still.
Standing still.
Couldn't do it.
Time out.
Falling
We
apart.
can't do this.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
falling
Could not
apart.
play
It was
together.
awful.
I mean, all those years we couldn't do standstills.
Yeah, we had trouble with standstills all the
They were
time.
only trained to do it.
They're trained to do it on-
the
I'd get
piano.
yelled at. These guys would be all over me. Why are you letting them play? I'm like, well, we got to play something, you know.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
It was. I'd never experienced anything quite like that. You know, it's a fairly simple tune. It's not like there's a lot of activity in the piece, but we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It was really amazing.
And I think the attention to those details were really, and the commitment to that kind of excellence, I think, is one of those lessons that the kids take with them when they leave, because of the the way that we did ensemble rehearsal and the techniques that we had to deploy, watch, don't listen. Okay, you guys can watch. Then you had some of the folks in between where we'd actually go out on the field just so that we could be with them to figure out what is it that they're hearing, what is it that they're seeing, and what is the clue that we can give them that will ensure that when the sound comes up front, it'll be in sequence. And a lot of it was just experimentation and then reinforcing it, but the attention to detail, the stuff with whether it's the writing with the color guard, the work with the cymbals. I mean, one of the things that was really interesting was we did a lot of experimentation in Crossman with the cymbals the year before, in '81 and '82, when we were able to come to the Cadets and bring that along with it. There was some really interesting things that we were able to accomplish with, cymbal lines. At some point in time, they were more accurate than the battery with some of the things that they were doing because of the talent that we have and the things that we were trying to experiment with. But even, one of my favorite stories was with the cymbal line when we went to DCI East in 1984. And Jim Campbell was judging at the time, and now very successful with the Cavaliers, and they've won, and he's got some drum trophies. But at the time, he was judging, and he did ensemble. And we went into critique, and he had given us a particular low number that day, and it's like, Jim, why didn't you? What's going on? Why didn't you give us any credit? I mean, look at what the pit's doing. Look at what the cymbal's doing. He goes, your cymbals don't do anything. They have 4 techniques. He goes, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and he turns behind. And it was just like, at that point in time, Hannum had to just grab me by my shoulder because I just was ready to attack the guy because we'd spent so much time developing all these techniques. And like you said, you get somebody who at the time didn't appreciate it. Now the irony of it is that he puts a lot of value into the things that at the time, he didn't. But the attention to detail, I think, really was something that I took away from that experience. But also, in '84, I think we lost one of the bass drummers went down in the drill, and it was interesting because they were doing the backup move at the end of Rumble Prologue.
Mookie.
Yeah, Mookie. He's doing the backup move, and it was one of the great.
I know their name.
It was one of the great recoveries of all time because they're moving backwards. The guy's carrying a large,
he was a big guy,
a 34-inch bass drum, moving backwards at 180 beats per minute, and goes down. And within 2 beats, he's back up and in sequence and going. And it's just like
there's not too many kids that could have picked that drum. He was not a. He was in a big boy. Yeah, he was a big boy. Just all these drummers. How did the horn line, the brass section, get so good so fast? I mean, some of it was before your time a little bit, but I mean, really, they went from really nothing to really right in there with everybody in a couple years.
And the fun is on the worst equipment playable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Soldering iron.
We had nothing.
Tape, duct tape. Jimmer, you can't deny Jimmer's charts. First of all, like he understands form and function better than probably anybody I know, and he writes so idiomatically well for the instruments that he's a large part, I think, of why those horn lines sounded the way they did. And then Donnie, Donnie has such an incredibly high standard that they worked very hard, and they wanted to be good for Donnie and for Jimmer. He held them to a level of accountability that I don't think they were going to get anywhere else, even in the judging. So their standard was high enough, and they shot to go to that standard every day. It was just a hard work ethic. But the combination of those two together, the product that Jimmer could give them, and Donnie's searing work ethic, I don't think anybody probably worked as hard as those horn lines.
Just recording of that Fire '82, that concert where we used to stand still.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, it's just really.
And I remember
way before its time.
Back then standing in front of those horn lines and just, I experienced things listening to them live that I can't say I've heard yet. They would play so loud, like the end of Rocky Point Holiday. That was so loud that your ears would crackle. And I never knew how to explain it other than my ears would crackle, and I was like, I can't hear any. It's so loud, I can't hear anything. But horses.
I can tell you, this is a very distinct memory I have. In '83 is when we were in Mawa putting the drill together, and we were putting the drill together for Rocky Point Holiday. So it's very early.
Yeah.
In this, not even in the season. This is before the summer. And now I was never around the Great Horn Line, and we're doing
Ever.
the end of Rocky Point Holiday, and I somehow got myself. I'm right up on the sideline. They come.
The baritones.
They come down and
Baritones.
slide out, and I never felt anything like that in my life. And I just went, man, you ain't in Kansas now. They literally. This was in a rehearsal. There was nothing
Yeah.
special. They just absolutely blew me back
Well,
off the
the
side.
same thing happened with me. I remember being in Maui, and I might have been even 82.
It was 82 was the first year. Sure.
And it was one of our first outdoor rehearsals, and I had the color guy. We were down one end, and there was the corps about a mile away. And all of a sudden, some kid comes over and he says, "George and Marc want you to come over." I said, "Oh, what do they want? I'm doing this." All right, so I walk over, and the two of them were either side of me, and we were like holding hands, and they said, "You got to hear this." And I'm not sure really what part it was. I thought it was Concerto and F or something, but all of a sudden, it was like my hair was blowing. I never heard a sound like that horn line when they hit that company front. Ba-da-da-da-da. It was like, ooh, and I remember we just giggled. It was like I had, as you said, I have never heard anything like it. You could
Yeah.
feel it. It
Well,
was
yes.
just incredible.
And think about those kids too. I mean, the kind of kids that were in there
Regular kids,
playing.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, that's what I was saying before. It's like we walked into a powerhouse of hungry talent.
Yeah.
Who not only were they talented, but they had never been in anything to get credit.
Well, a lot of those kids just came because '80 was all those kids from nowhere,
Well,
really, and really
it's a
most of them
combination
didn't come back.
Kids from the South.
Some of them say, the kind of key guys, New Orleans guys.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys, it was, all they could do to make it one year. They were exhausted. But we picked a lot of guys from Pennsylvania, a lot of Reading guys, Unks, and his whole. Half the drum line, 3/4 of the drum line was from Westchester.
Yeah.
All those
Yeah.
guys. These are Merle, who ended up singing lead in Les Mis. He was Jean Valjean. I'm walking down Broadway, and he comes up to me. And he starts talking to me, and he goes, "George Hopkins." He keeps talking. I don't recognize him or anything. He goes, Merle, and he doesn't look like Merle because his hair was all that, and in fact, his name was like something else. He had like a stage name. But this guy was in your snare line. He ends up, but there were all those guys, and they just started. And then I think at that time, unfortunately, a lot of corps were starting to drop. There were like the little guys, the Royal Brigades, a lot of those. So we started pulling in a lot of people around it. Bayonne didn't last much past. And when their last year was, they were 80, maybe 79,
No, they were.
No, it
80s.
was in the 80s.
82. They get so we started pulling in all kinds of people there. So
And those kids played for a long time. It's not like they, had not done drum corps, but
No,
they
we had
grew
a
up
lot
in
of-
the
yeah, we had a
small
lot of
corps, and
drum corps
they
kids.
played for a long
That's what I'm
time.
saying. It's not like like now you get the music major kids and the talented and trained. They come, they do their 1 or 2 years. These are all drum corps kids.
Yeah,
Who
they were-
have been marching for
7, 8,
years
10,
and
12
years. And
years.
they had never been in a great group. Whether they were in the cadets that always,
Yeah.
were bottom of the thing, or wherever. But these were no people who were not used to winning, so they were dead for it. They wanted it.
Yeah.
a lot of people call up, I want to start a corps. How'd you do that? How'd you get them back again? I don't think we could have done that if it wasn't the cadets, because they had such a tradition that everybody wanted them to be good. So as soon as Michael figured it out, all the alumni came back, all the money started coming back. We went from no support to $100,000 from alumni and fans like that. And it was all out there. They were so rough for such a long time through the 70s that, it was tough. So people wanted, that whole East thing, and that was part of it. And
Absolutely.
Oh, no one had ever won, but
it was all the rich guys, and here we were the poor little guy, So that lasted a few years, and then we were like us. After 3 in a row, they were like,
Boy, but they really were rooting for us.
"Oh
It
yeah,
really is.
that year."
Because we were we were the everyman type thing.
Yeah.
We weren't the West Coast.
Hey,
We didn't have all the money. We were, we're trying to get.
pushing
You
the
didn't have
buses
any
up the
money.
hills and-
I think my highlight of my life probably still was beating my Santa Clara is my core. We used to jump up and down on the beds, and we were in college pretending we were wherever we were, listening to this stuff, going nuts. And here we are, we're in Huntington, West Virginia, and and they come down and tell me the judges are leaving. And there's no critique. I'm like, what do you mean the judges are leaving? They're like, the judges are leaving. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, the judges are leaving. I'm like, we won? They're like, judges are leaving. I'm like, oh. So I'm standing at the back, and now I start thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And they announce the score, and I run out, and I kind of sneak around the drum majors, like, whatever you do, we're going to walk like 2 miles away, because I'm afraid these kids are going to start cheering. I'm ready. I'm going to cheer, you know, and they're going to make fools of ourselves. So I took them like 4 blocks away, and they got dismissed, and they just stood there looking at me. Nothing. I'm like, son of a gun. You know, it's like you train them to do that, but you don't really believe they're going to do it. Or the first time we won, I mean, they just stood there. We got criticized in '83 for being autotrons because the kids just stood there.
They wanted that.
Out of respect for everybody else. And that was the idea.
Do you remember what we did after the Huntington show?
Well, I was going to say, the thing was, so where everybody's gone, and I'm like, I would go, we can't leave yet. And everybody's like, why not? I said, we just can't leave yet, because there were all these people around, the critique was there, and waited till everybody's down, and I said, okay, let's go. And everybody got out. We got to push the stupid buses out to get them started.
No, and the equipment truck. Our equipment, the blimp house, was next to their shiny with the garage door contra cases in there, and we're jump starting the blimp house past them. It was the funniest.
I had to wait till they were gone. I was so embarrassed, but.
I remember the first show that we won Best Color Guard, and that was the one thing that, not that winning that particular trophy was any more than drums or something else, but for us, I had been pretty successful with the Lancers, and I can remember April Gilligan coming up to me and saying, well, we ever going to win it? And I was like, listen, we're doing good, you know, we have all these costumes, and we definitely put the best of both worlds together. We had the hardcore, as I was saying earlier, the equipment with the dance and the finesse and the artistry and fluidity. But I said, it's going to happen, maybe not now. And I remember the very first show we went on tour, and I think Madison was there and Cavaliers, and they were announcing the different individual trophies. And I remember walking away and saying, that's our, you know, to myself, we're not ready yet. And they announced Garfield Cadets. And I can remember going to see the color guard afterwards, and it was like if I said, okay, drop down on the ground and do 100 push-ups right now, they would have done anything I said at that point. It was like all of a sudden, like, we believe. And it was just like, it was so it was wonderful, because we knew we were good, but we didn't know, and to finally just get that little bit of like, yeah, we're watching you. I was pretty neat.
That shows that you remember that the competitive part of it, but you know, we went to Madison. It was before Whitewater, but it was Madison. We're going to see Santa Clara, I think the Blue Devils, but Santa Clara, Madison.
Phantom, maybe.
Big show.
Big. And
right before the show, they forgot the shawls, because we were staying at Whitewater.
Oh, yeah.
And I sent my brother was on tour driving the Love van, you know, and we shipped him back, you know, and God knows what he was on. He drove 150 miles an hour, but he showed up right after the shows. We didn't have any shawls, and I don't think we thought. I mean, if we thought we might win, maybe, but it would be 10th, 2. I mean, it was like I was like, well, there's no way. And we won by a bunch, you know. It was like we were, but you know, it's that kind of thing. We were so just trying to do our stuff. It was like, oh my gosh, like we won by a lot, you know. We're like looking in the parking lot, like, well, how's that happening?
That was the fun part
about it. We didn't really have any idea. We weren't. Yeah, it was all every day we won a show. It was like when's this going to stop? Like, what's going on? You know, like it was a surprise. And I think that's why when we lost, it wasn't that bad at prelims. It was like, because we didn't, you know, we knew we weren't very good. And I remember standing outside and watching all the kids in Santa Clara. There was a bank of phones, and they were so happy.
Actually, they were on one side and Devils were on the other. You know, we had to walk through it, and they were just having a puck. Because not only did we lose, but we tied Blue Devils.
Right.
So we were tied for third, or however you. Right. So it was like they both caught us.
Right.
And you know, we just had to walk through that. You know, that's again, as a teacher, you're always, you know, you got your philosophy and the way you think things should be, and you talk to the kids about it. But then, you know, all of a sudden, you know, it's put out there.
There's just nothing you can do.
We always talked about how you act in front of other people.
Yes.
And it was always, you never brag and you never cry. If you lose a show and you're mad about it, that's private. You don't share that with people. And the same thing with winning. That was just, you know, because we had all lost so much. And watching these other courts,
we all knew how to live. Stick it in your,
we knew what it was like.
You know, jump
hurt.
up and down and throw the things, and you know, it always made me feel.
It hurt. Yeah.
It hurt. So it was like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. Not if I get the chance to. So, but you know, here they are walking down, and you're sitting there going, you know, what are they going to do? Because any other drum corps, the Crossmen and the 27th Lancers, would have put this stuff down, turned around, and said what? And started, because that's how intimidating they were. They were right in our faces, laughing at us, and. You know,
I remember the kids going, they were talking to me going,
walked out with a smile on their face.
I remember the kids actually enjoying it, going, look at those kids, they're so happy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, wow, good for them. I'm like, you know, I'm like the old school going, what do you mean good for them? You know, but they were like,
But I don't think they believed they could lose again. I didn't.
Yeah.
I really didn't.
Wasn't,
Really didn't feel like we were.
we weren't very, we weren't very good that night. I remember that.
Yeah.
In between everything else and all the disasters, it just was like one of those, it was good, but, yeah. But that corps was so good, I think they probably knew they could do something. At that point, they went 38, 39 in a row. It was like, you kind of get a hang of it after a while.
But still, that's usually the kind of thing, that's the thing that can make someone crack.
That's-
You
and
go
that's-
there and then you lose. You can lose all your skill because of the mental. They didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't lose a thing. Now, they were actually, their best show of the year was coming out of that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I'll always remember the audience reaction in '83 in Miami at the end of the show.
Oh yeah.
Because we had this running gag at the end of the Z Pool with some of the drum staff, particularly with Grant Davis. He would, we had this thing about the corps was communicating so well with the audience that they were throwing their young children at us, throwing their babies. So at the end of the show, the second Z Pool, they start to do it. And the place is going up, and Grant Davis is going, come on, give us your children, throw us your babies, and the place is just going so loud, and then the chant of East, East, East. I mean, it was an incredible moment, the way that it communicated with the
there was
audience.
so many times, I think, throughout the years where, I always would say to the color guard, the numbers don't matter because 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're not going to remember the numbers, but you are going to remember how you felt with that audience. And I can remember just getting goosebumps because it was like, my God, we knew they were good and we felt, but to hear the roar of the crowds for the Z-Pole, for anything, even with Maroney in '84, picking her up, dropping her off. I think the audience were just, we were definitely teaching them on how to watch a show.
Yeah.
Because they learned how to follow what you want them to follow. Maybe the judges didn't as much, but certainly the audience did. And even '85 with that opener, with
Rick Wygant coming out of the Tom Smith, right?
Coming out of the next town over, and then not just running. But marching actually, but their feet moving so fast. And people were just like, are they going to make it? And each show they got farther and farther away, of course.
I remember learning that. I was with Michael. That was not in the plan.
No.
All that running around, we were fuming. And it was just like, that was like the beginnings of like George and you just come, we're going to do what we want to do. It's like, what is all this?
That was the beginning. Because actually,
that was great.
Kid was asking me, what was the first time we did freeform? Because it hadn't not been done. Bayonne. Was it the Skyliners, then the
Traffic Jam.
And actually, I guess because I got to hang with Bobby Hoffman in '89, one year when he came to work with us, it was actually the Hackensack Blue Demons back in '50s, whatever, were the ones that did free, and they used to call it the Hackensack. But contemporary drum corps, there wasn't, freeform was just, if you did it, it was the Traffic Jam, and that was it. And we actually, there's a section of '84 where George, and I was always like, come on, do it, because we had always talked about it. We used to call it the buzz, like the old TVs, when you turn them off and it was just all fuzzy. It was like that. So there was a section in America, the singing beginning, where the color guard was written to be in this freeform set, and they were in this space and they were going to come down and do all this moving around while the corps was singing. And we taught it, but it was like, couldn't figure, it looked ugly because it was freeform, wasn't it? It was a picture, and chickened out. Was like, oh, that's no good, and put them in an arc, and that was that. And then '85 was like, just do it. He was kind of just. I remember sitting there going, he just went like that, He just did it just like that. And he was always the fastest writer. The peak was like 25 pages in a day. And he was the fastest writer of all time. But, with this stupid, before he got good teeth, he had the tombstone teeth. And he looked up at me going, with that stupid laugh. And he goes, that's how we're starting the show.
Yeah.
F George Hopkins, I don't care what everyone else says. It was one of those. And I was like, cool. So, and I remember, when we first put it out there. And
It was outside the Dominican Center. I could picture it.
You can't start like this, and the alumni, and I guess that's when we first started getting alumni support. You were.
It just wasn't anything we were talking about up to that. It was not. It wasn't the coordinated show we were talking about. It was like people taking over.
Show that as we did it, the kids started taking liberties because and they would people start go up into the stands and who could get the furthest away. And the one, my boy Thom Smith, is one of the great marches of all time. It was like it would be like this every show, and it'd go further and further. And so it was always we knew. And then Michael got in. It's like Whitewater, there's a tunnel, and then it became the plan. We were gonna. So I remember in prelims, Thom Smith started in the tunnel. No one knew what was going on. Yep. And all of a sudden the course starts, and then all of a sudden he runs out, and the whole crowd was like,
"Huh?"
Yeah. Well, so now by finals, everyone knows it's coming. So he's in the tunnel, and it's like a rock concert. There's 500 people in the tunnel, and the show starts, and the whole crowd's waiting. And he waited, and he waited. And I knew the time of when he would hit the end zone. It was all planned. You hit the end zone in this count, you hit the 30 on this count. I knew, so we always knew he was going to, I was never afraid he wasn't going to make it. It was programmed to look like he wasn't, but, even like he would, some shows would say stumble on the, we had all these plans. And, it was like he wasn't coming out, and all of a sudden, it's like, I was like, I'm going to kill him. He's not going to, couldn't possibly make it. And, it was like I always said, it was the first time an individual got a standing ovation for marching.
As soon as he came out.
He hit the tunnel, it was a standing ovation. Now, they didn't clap again for 7 minutes, but, and it was all, it was that risk factor of, that, and then the kid taking it on way past anything we had ever talked about.
Well, I think as he hits that, and as he comes in, one of the other changes, and one of the great things about Michael Cesario on the effects side is that he knew, when to add a little something, to just boost the effect, or when to take something away. And in this instance, where when all of a sudden everyone hits that block, and at that moment either they're in that block or they're not, and then when he adds 2 counts of silence for everyone to just sit there and go and take in what just happened, and then have the core come in together with that huge attack, was one of the great effects of all time, because all that stuff just came together. You had the dramatic impact of silence, and then that first impact is just one of the great programming moments that I've ever been able to see.
I've been using silence ever since.
Yeah. Well, maybe to wrap it up, maybe we just run around and your, I don't care, memory or whatever your final comments are. We may never, I don't know if we'll be here for the 40th or the 50th, so if we are, we'll be, might be in a little wheelchair by then or something, so. I don't know, Sully, you want to shoot?
My memory?
Or whatever, or final commentary.
Yeah, I guess, now, as you say, 20 some odd years, I haven't, since 81, the only year I haven't taught the Corps is 86. So it's,
Bastard.
Good for you. That was a good year to take off.
To prove my point, you saw what happened in 86.
Yes, I was at Santa Clara at the time. I definitely saw what happened.
But, something that started off, and for all of us, none of this was life choice. It wasn't, what I want to be when I grow up. By any stretch of the imagination, whatever dreams I had as a kid, none of them will involve drum corps, except that it was my whole life as a kid. But it was always about I'm going to get out of it at some point. And then when you start teaching, it was a way to stay a kid for a little longer. For me, it's been a way to stay a kid for almost 50. And to look, to sit back with you guys. We were just talking outside on the break. Nothing I am now, nothing that I've done in the last 10 or 15 years could have happened you know, if it weren't for these 3 years. When you say the learning and the experience and, you know, all of it, the taking a risk, you know, and the fact that because there was no structure, there was no, you can say George was the director and Michael was the program coordinator, there was no leader. People at any time could take on the responsibility of saying, I'm going to do what I want here, and this is how the Corps is going to march on your right foot. Anyone care? It's tough, I'm doing it. You know, and we all did that in our own ways. You know, all those things you learn, we learned from those 3 years. You know, what I know and what I am now is only would have happened because of those, you know, those 3.
Michael, final.
Wow. I just thought, I mean, looking back, it's so fun to come in at that time because, you know, I was so ignorant about so many things back then and so naive that, you know, you're around these great people, you know, and I learned a lot of good things from them that, you know, some of which I knew at the time, some of which I didn't realize till a lot of years later. But it was just cool that, you know, we played great music. There were great people around to write and teach, and you just got up and worked hard every day to do that kind of stuff. And, you know, for me, 85, I think, was obviously my favorite of the 3 years just because of what I was, you know, allowed to do then. And, you know, you talk about Michael Cesario and what he was able to contribute to everybody. He could say, he could never tell you, like, we'll put this note here and do that, but he'd look at me and go, opera buffa. Opera buffa. And you're going home, opera buffa, what's he talking about? The end of Candide should be opera buffa. And like, okay, now I get it. So he gives you the great ideas, you know, to go with. And Jim Prime that year also, too, he was just very supportive. And, you know, because we were so not into the competitive thing back then, we would always leave during the retreats and stuff like that. We'd go get something to eat. So at Madison, it was in finals, we did the show, and I was thrilled with the drum corps, other than our little bump.
Oh,
it was a great year. I was thrilled to death. And we went to a McDonald's back behind the stadium there. We ate, we thought it was kind of done. We came out, and we stood in this alley that's kind of behind the stadium there, sat on the steps of this campus building or whatever, and we're listening, and they came to second place, and it wasn't Garfield. And he jumped up, and we were dancing like fools back there. He's hugging me, and we're laughing, and it was just so cool because he, you know, he was always a teacher. He wanted the best for everybody, and he was so glad that the way things turned out, and, you know, truly a priceless year. And he, and along with the other people that were here, just made it so priceless. You know, I don't know if I ever will experience something like that again, but very cool.
Well, I look at my drum corps career as in 2 stages, and the first was with the Lancers, and when I had a lot of my learning experiences. But when I came to Cadets, it was like a whole new world opened, and I think it was because we had no rules as far as anything went. It wasn't like we need this is their opener, this is our bye-bye, this is, you know, all those old term drum corps terms that all of a sudden none of that mattered. You know, Hopkins just let us do, I mean, I'm sure you probably pulled your hair out a lot and behind closed doors, but you let us do what we had to do. Michael Cesario, Greg, Sadie, I mean, the people that were around for the color guard. And I'm going to tell you something, that Garfield color guard back then has certainly set the trend for what they're doing today, because they were the first corps, and I could be wrong about this, that really did that combination, that really knew how to do it both ways, with the equipment, with the dance, and I've repeated that a couple of times here, but that was so important to me. And the other thing is, from all that trust that these kids who we came in and here's what we're going to do, and they just trusted everything that we said, and that it worked out, and that we got to trust them. Here, try this. Okay, you know, you can do it. Beautiful. And they would take it the next level. And today, to this day, 2005, I come down here, and the color guard, kids that probably weren't even born back then.
They weren't. I already know that.
Were all over me. Hey, you know, can you do a flag block and stuff that I did back then, which is still, you know, people do today. There was a reason for it, and they're all over me. It's like, where do you get that? Where do you get that in this day and age? It's just, I am just so proud to be part of this organization and to know that whatever accomplishments I made then is still going on, and it's just a terrific thing.
And
Well, I think initially I'd said something about, for me, I think those 3 years, and just in general, my time with Garfield was far and away the most fertile of my, teaching career, and just, there you go.
How appropriate.
Some things never change, though. But it really was, and I think that we happened to be in the right place at the right time with so many excellent people who were willing to try anything. And I have to give a lot of credit to those kids that were in the percussion section, because they were doing things that we had no idea what it was. And just for them to trust us and to have it be okay to do those things, what was really in effect for the betterment of the total package and the total direction that the Corps was trying to go in. They deserve a lot of credit, those kids do, because they did a lot of untraditional things for percussion players, and really, as you were saying, even with the crab steps and all that, they really opened up a whole different way of how percussion could be treated. So it just seemed to me like at that time I was always trying to figure something out. I mean, that's what I remember, because there was so much to learn that's a lot of what I recall. And then and just to be grateful to have somebody like Thom be in the line, to be able to teach with him, and to have him in effect carry it on from that point forward, says a lot about the overall organization. I mean, he's been here for whoever knows how long.
he does 25 years. He's two behind me.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I get a great deal of satisfaction in seeing that growth through those years, and the exhilaration of the performances was just unbelievable. I mean, it's nothing that could be matched. So very lucky.
Cool.
A few things that really jump to mind from those years are a lot of the things that I took away personally, and that I think a lot of the kids have taken away. There's rarely a day that goes by that some of the lessons that I learned from being involved with the Corps at that period of time don't come back, and that I don't utilize them in some way. And some of the things that were taught at the time that you actually learn, several years later. The commitment to excellence, the dedication, not to accept the status quo as the way that it has to be, to look for other opportunities, look for other solutions to problems. Don't just take, the traditional path. These are, life skills that I think that the Corps embeds in individuals, and embedded it in us, by being in that environment, and then we've embedded it in the young men and women that have come through the Corps to take with them as well, by creating that kind of environment for them. So I think that's really one of the big takeaways of that 3-year period for me. The other takeaway is just a recognition of what a unique period that it was now 20 years later, and we're able to look back, being a student under Thom, and then having them take a chance on me to come here to teach, and then for us to be able to develop and implement things with the percussion that you look outside today, or you look out any field today, are commonplace, were things that didn't happen until we did it. There wasn't a pit until we created one. there weren't concert instruments until we put them out on the field. You weren't bringing in, the college music makers and kids from conservatory until you gave them a reason to come. And that was an environment that we were able to create as part of, the commitment to excellence that was here. And, I just, in looking back and reviewing the tapes this week before coming in here, it was just really a great feeling and a sense of warmth of all the great things that we went through together. We went through some great things together. We went through some not so great things together. But the one thing that I'll always remember is that we did it together. And for that, I'm grateful for both for the people that we taught with and the kids that were a part of those organizations. It was a great time.
Well, first, thank you for spending the time here. Hope we're famous, make lots of money. Have to. And I think you have to acknowledge, all the staffs, I can't even probably name everyone from those 3 years, but certainly, as we talked about, Jimmer and Donnie, George, Michael, I think they were probably the other key people, Greg Cesario. Right. But, that group of people that hung out at that house, in Teaneck, on if not a daily basis, certainly on a every weekend basis, to try to figure all that out. So, I think from a personal level, I think back then I was just grateful to be around everyone and had people that, took me aside and said, you got to get buses, you got to figure out how to do money, you got to figure this. Like, I didn't know anything. To this day, I will not eat ravioli because that's all we ate for years, because that's all we knew how to cook, because we never had a food truck, because it always broke down his first day out on tour. And there's nothing to be proud of. I grew up with, when we were in the Crossmen, it was a little rough, and it's only a little bit later, actually, it's probably later 80s where I figured out that these kids deserve the best money can buy. Not, they don't have to do it the way we did it, but so, I think through that time it was just keeping up with everybody and hoping we got down the road, and if I could add a little bit here and there, it was an opportunity. But I think most importantly, those 3 years, we won by a 10th one year, lost by, whatever we did, it set the stage for what we've been able to do for the last 20 years. We've won a bunch of championships since then, but, the cadets you'll see tonight are just the organization itself. A lot of you guys stayed around for another 6, 7, 5, 8 years. Marc, 20 years. Some people, some of us, he and I, but, what they get now is so much more than what we gave them in terms of education, but it's just because we know so much more. We're not little kids running around like we used to be. But that all happened because we all stuck together, and there was I'm sure, a lot of times where no one wanted to stick together. I didn't want any parts of the people there. I probably didn't want to do that. But, it's everything, and you talk to kids about it today, and it's legendary now. I never thought I'd be old enough to be a legend, but, when you talk to them...
You are, George.
Yeah.
You're old enough anyway.
Yeah. Well, when you talk to them about this, and that's the first thing, Peggy, you realize they weren't even around. They weren't even an idea. It's like, oh my gosh, and now there's kids that we taught. Brian Wilkes' kids are here, and other kids trying out. You're like, oh, this is terrible. Kids are trying out. It's like, oh, yeah. But it's all part of the process, and that, we did get lucky a little bit. Zingali, all those people coming, and you talk about a lot of stuff. Zingali was teaching Alliance, didn't tell me he had a contract that not to teach anybody else. It's like, oh my, they'd pull up in a van, he'd disappear, I'd see him leaving, and we'd go steal him. All that. There was all kinds of stuff through those 3 years because we were still figuring it out, and people that, Greg Pitch, guys that aren't never even taught, but helped us get down the road to the next day, or cooks, with Frost, or people that got in that truck, that little piece of nothing, to feed the kids. If they hadn't done any of that, we couldn't have the monster trucks out there today with the greatest equipment in the world and all that stuff. So it was just great. It was great to be a part of. I don't think any of us planned it, and I didn't plan to be here, but thanks so much for spending the time. It's a lot of fun.
And Sully, had you not gone away for that 1 year, we would have had to wait 2 more years to get together, because it would have taken 20 years to get to Threepeat.
That's true.
That's right.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.